Okay. Bueno, buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are going to start the afternoon session with a round table entitled as the conference. And I'm going to start by introducing the members of this panel. I'll start by myself. I know it's very polite, but I just want to break the ice. I just want to say that I'm Drt4all2013, the Accessible Technology Manager of the ENG Foundation under the Department of R&D and I. And I'm here with the scientific committee. However, we do not have all the members present because we have to apply a filter, select the most relevant works done, which is difficult because they are all very valuable and quality-like. And we also have to select those that go aligned with, that are fully aligned with the trends of this conference. It is not only technology, it's a very specific type of technology for the role we want to give to the end users. As I said, I will start by presenting all the members of the panel. I'm not going to follow a strict order. I'll just follow the order on my paper. Alejandro Rodríguez Azcaso, first and foremost, who's part of the Artificial Intelligence Department of the university, the IT University of Madrid, the Distance Learning University, UNED. To my right, Jaime López Crae, who is a professor of the Mathematics University in Paris 8. We also have to the left, next to Saturn, Miguel Ángel Vález Dugoy of the Department of the Telematic Engineering and Architecture of the Polytechnic University of Madrid. Next to him, Satur Torres, who is the Innovation Manager of the Vodafone Foundation of Spain. To my right, I have Daniel Guasch Murillo, the Professor and Chair of the Accessibility Department of the Universidad Politécnica of Catalonia, and Alberto Jardón Huete, who is the professor from the Engineering Systems Department of the Carlos III University of Madrid. I won't like to spend so much time in this brief introduction. I just wanted to explain the motto and the main title of this meeting, an accessible society where the protagonist is you. As I said before, this might sound repetitive. It isn't very glamorous or striking, but to be honest, when we had discussions in order to choose this title, we focused on the nuances behind the title to this session. The nuances that led us to choose this title. One of the common grounds that led us to choose this title, it's the use of technology in the current society, the massive use of technology in the last years. In the past, the traditional services, telephone, personalized care, now it's been replaced with automatic systems, voice systems, internet systems, those that are provided to the public sector. For example, if you want to ask for an appointment at the doctor's office, at the end of the day, we are overwhelmed by the technologies in some cases, and in some of the cases it's providing a top quality service. But we just wanted to highlight the interaction between people and technologies, whether it's machines or softwares, in definite terms when we talk about automated systems. Another reason why we chose this topic is the fact that users, after so many years using technologies, they no longer are passive users. They've rather become active users, and we believe, and this is open to discussion, but we believe that our users are capable of modifying things that were strict in the past, sold by manufacturers. They can change it now, and this is again something that we'd like to discuss with the audience. We believe users are very powerful. We'd like them to be that powerful, and we believe this is an ongoing process. Finally, the methodological issues which are paramount to this conference, because most of the papers that will be presented tomorrow have to involve users. They have to be user-centric, at least on the testing stages. Our main goal is for the users to be involved in the entire process, in the entire life cycle of the products, not only on the testing stage. And I would like to know Jaime and Daniel's opinion about the methodology, because I still have my concerns or reservations. Are the technologies incorporating users in reality the way we believe? Are they involving users? Could you please tell us a little bit about this? Oftentimes, we are talking about passive protagonists. They are just so-called those who suffer the misinterpretation or the lack of coherence when taking the problem into account. In that respect, I'd like just to highlight a few issues regarding these problems. First of all, regarding software, the lack of compatibility, the fact that the new or latest version should respect the predefined versions, those previous versions, but that doesn't always happen. Namely, when it comes to software that was developed afterwards, those that are based on a predefined software, and the new developer doesn't know why the previous developer hadn't developed a few points that could be essential for the future accessibility. That happens very often. For example, if we change a machine, you put on the new software and it doesn't work anymore. It no longer works, which entails heavy investments in staff, in intelligence, and this is not really affordable. Another problem, a most concerning one, and this is really a paradox, that is the access to e-documents. We have all the possibilities, especially for the visually impaired people, to access these e-documents, but they are blocked with a name. And the aim is to protect the intellectual property and to avoid stealing IP. Well, we know that the World Intellectual Organization on June the 28th adopted and passed a protocol by saying that it cannot block the access to visually impaired people or anyone with any type of impairment. Companies shall convey this to everybody, and they stressed out the problems in passing this into the different legislations. In France, there is a library called Platoon, and this is the disabilities section. So anyone who is impaired should be able to access these type of things. This is virtually impossible. Our university for the past 3 years has tried to access it and it was impossible. So just to give you an idea. Another problem, and in line with the question you were asking me before, people with impairments should be part of the development, especially they should be part of the testing stage. Oftentimes we run research projects nationally and internationally wise, and I try as much as I can to reserve one budget item to pay for those professionals with impairments so that they are part of the development stages, but especially during the testing stages. But people have to change their mindsets. They think, no, we don't really have to involve them in the testing stages. We don't really need to allocate a specific budget for it. But nevertheless, I try as much as I can to reserve these capital for the salary of these people with impairments. If we are running a test for the Paris metro, we need these individuals to be part of it. But again, some people believe the professionals shouldn't be professionals as such. They should be volunteers. Period. These are just a few comments and remarks I wanted to share with you. We can continue talking about this later on. I'd like to pick up one of your comments. An architecture professor not so long ago talked about design, how design evolves throughout time, and he said, in the field of architecture, and I quote, "First of all, we discover a need, a safety need, a weather-related need. Once we've covered that need, once we have that concept, the concept evolves, and there is a true technique explosion. We need a shelter. We need a house that protects us against the weather, against the water, the rain, and the floods. Then you decide the materials, the width, and the length of the house. That is the explosion, but that is not the last stage of the concept, the evolution of this concept. The last stage is when the user is entering the house. Not only you need a safe, secure, big house, but it needs to be comfortable as well. And this is the concept of user-centric design. Not only you have to cover for those needs, but also for the end use of that product. Not only do we have to think about the user's needs, but about the capabilities of those users and their aspirations. These may apply to a tablet, a phone, a car. It doesn't really have to be a house. You really need to think about the aspirations. It's not only about talking, it's about conveying your views or communicating with a group of friends, with a social network, trying to understand these users. So when we talk about design, we realize that not only it is necessary to create different categories of users, but to get to know the users. So far, we only established categories. This is someone with this or that impairment. We restrict their participation in this or that area. It's like we're labeling them. We are labeling them. We put them like in a drawer, and then everyone is the same. We believe that by just applying universal design principles, that's enough. And what we are currently finding and realizing is that we are all different. We need to know users. We need to run user tests. We need to set parameters and get to know our users firsthand. And then go back to the starting point of the design, and then we'll have to adapt our design, picking up the best of everything. The contributions of universal design, we can then customize it by the support of additional methodologies or tools, and then, only then, we'll manage to create products that are adapted to the user's needs. These will entail new methodologies. In other DRT4all conferences, we were focusing on just a single narrow line of products, but now we are changing our mindset because we really need to know the users. We need to become user-centric. It is a very complicated program. This is a very simple case. In France, they are building up a few streets with no architectural barriers whatsoever, no pavement, no curves. Cars can drive at 30 kilometers per hour tops, and people with impairments are delighted, especially those in a wheelchair. But those visually impaired, they don't know when are they crossing a street, when are they in the middle of the street. We don't know what to do about it. Sometimes things are incompatible. I am familiar with Miguel Angel and Alberto's work in the physical world. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit of your experience, but I think you have to be very accurate, because I think you're working with robotic arms. I think you have to be fine-tuning, very accurate. And again, I believe that you really need a very strict model. Also, if you work with a digital home, same applies. Security and safety issues are of paramount importance. We have to work hand in hand with users in order to boost safety. I'd like to make a few comments regarding the role of users as testers of the system. And for quite some time, in one European project in the field of robotics, one of the main projects where I was involved, since the very beginning, they considered the possibility of including and involving testers, and their role was clearly predefined. It was yet another stakeholder with its allocated budget to it, and they had the opportunity during the first stages of the design. They could raise their opinions and issue their feedback. Then there were additional complications, but they were always involved, and we could always solve all the problems thanks to their participation and most valuable feedback. And when I look backwards, I've realized that there aren't any initiatives like this, initiatives involving users from day one, giving users such a leading role. The truth is that in the past years, and with the ongoing development and improvement of robotic technology, with robotic arms telling them their interaction partners or stakeholders, we've realized that there is an arising need to involve users not only in the final test trial, but also during the design stages. It is vital to all of us. It also requires a professional role. It is difficult to involve somebody in a series of tests that may span along 3-4 days with control tests, which requires full devotion and hours. So again, as Jaime said, I agree, sometimes it is difficult to pay for those hours, and you really have to fight hard and organize yourself, or try to look for volunteers who believe they can contribute, and they do it voluntarily. But again, it is very difficult to involve them professionally. This happens to us from the research point of view, but much more, I think, to companies with a much more commercial approach, those who require a proper balance between expenses and income. Therefore, we need to take all these into account. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for having invited me, and I'd like to thank the attendees. Regarding those who use the systems, things have changed. In the 1980s, we used to set user-centric design, and now we say users-centric design. Mid-90s, I learned a lot by working with children with impairments, then with people with some chronic diseases, with certain visual motor impairments, then with people with Parkinson, some with medullary injury. So they are all people, they are all individuals, and they all have some common needs. The interaction channels will vary depending on their expectations and background and training. But I'd like to say that learning increases. It's incremental learning. Perhaps we found something that's useful for a group of individuals that's also useful for another group, or not. And I agree with Jaime when he said that if the technologies do not respect previous technology, then we find ourselves in a technological disruption. And in the Drt4all committee, we are very positive and constructive, because we want solutions for everybody. Instead of saying the protagonist is you, I could say the antagonist is me. And it seems like this is what the system tells the users. After the 90s, when I was in the World Drt4all conference, user-driven innovation, rather, taking into account the users' expectations, and many solutions and products, well-known products, were launched back then. But the 21st century step is still awaiting us. The the user-centered product. Not only a technical assistance product, but a product that can become closer to users. Why haven't we reached this stage yet? Because oftentimes the developers those implementing and those selling their only users are themselves or their peers or colleagues at university. Because if a product is too accessible and you go and buy it in the store, he who can sell it is not very familiar with it. You are the protagonist when five elderly people are interacting with a big mobile phone with a big keyboard, and they sell it and they are demanding it, and they become aware of the existence of this or that company. This is one of the questions I wanted to raise here. The communication channels have changed. They are two-way channels. Saturn is very close to the market, although in a research way, not in a market way, but perhaps he knows whether these two-way channel, whether the industry is aware of the society's opinion, or are they completely ignoring it? Are we doing business as usual? The industry is increasingly more aware of the opinion of potential users, and after the market analysis on paper, they've moved on to a direct contact with users, with different focus groups, by creating in corporations one department devoted for certain groups or certain targets. Some people focus much more on impairments, some other on the elderly people. The society is changing, but the society is also offering channels. If companies do not anticipate themselves, if they do not take the client's opinions into account, they will go bankrupt. And I'm talking about the social networks here, because the social networks have set a very direct channel with a full cascade effect, which not only works in the field of accessibility, but in every single field. Companies are very aware of these, and the way they generate new products and services, because of this dynamic, they need to take into account the needs of the users, and especially accessibility needs. We've also found ourselves with a huge potential to provide customized solutions at affordable prices. We can introduce accessibility in the software layer and not to be too dependent on the hardware layer. I'd like to make an analogy with the ongoing change occurring in the learning and training arena. The current educational model is going to change dramatically. Same happened with the technologies, and producers have to take the users' opinions into account, and same applies to the field of education. What are the new services? The e-learning tools have become something very natural to us, but we still have a long way to go in the field of accessibility. And are we really and truly detecting these needs, the users' needs? And here we're talking about all types of users, regardless of the age, capacities, gender, preference.
Alejandro, what can you tell us about this?
David, my dear colleague, I do think it is key that
our universities get to know our customers, especially because I have a lot of colleagues from the university field, and we cannot afford to lose track of our customers. There's increasing rivalry among universities, and we need to take into account our customers and cater for them. For a university such as ours, with 200,000 students, well, in such a university we have 7,000 students with a disability, and in order to cater for this wide range of students with a wide range of needs, if we succeed in dealing well with our users and customers, we will serve better other users who don't have a well-specified disability, but they do study in very strange environments, because out of the 200,000 students, well, we have people who study at their office with a computer, others just hear the lessons through the phone on the subway, they check lessons through their smartphones, so the type of technologies that they use are very similar to internet technologies, and well used, they will enable an iPad user or an Android user, they will allow them to access this teaching resources. We have a colleague from the support unit, and she posed a question which is very interesting. At Unidis, which is the name of the unit, they have a very direct relationship with students. I really liked a publication which was called Students Matter, and in that book they were telling, according to your experience, what it felt like to study at UNED, what it was like for people with motor needs to study with them. So this motivated us to put together 8 videos, and now I'm making a bit of advertising. We put together a series of videos that we are using for engineering training that has to do with accessibility and visibility, and we wanted to use those videos to train people as to how UNED students use technologies for the purpose of studying, because some students have problems to see images, they have problems to hear video sounds, or they have problems to use computers because they cannot physically access the keyboard. If you notice, these are 3 examples in which students are just the ones who are perceiving the information, and that's no longer something that's in place, nor in our university nor in other universities do we have master classes. We should be increasingly leaving that aside. Students are a key player. For instance, in Bologna, if you're aware of this new approach, a lot of the teachings that students get are generated by themselves. These very students are creating videos. They are able to write math formulas at a forum. So this is nothing obvious for a sight impaired person or for a person who has motor problems. So this is a challenge that we have in traditional universities, but when people with impairments become creators, we are really facing those hurdles. I wanted to take this chance to get to the point that Saturn was getting to. It's very interesting to see how to do that at our universities. We learn from our students. We need to put together user models, and still we're learning about how to proceed. We still need to know how many of our students need dubbing, or how many of them need DAISY books, or how many of them need audio description, because this is something that you need to do in an orderly manner, and you need to do it forehand, because resources are not endless. So this is why we need to implement very precise models. And this is when new technologies really become of utterly important. Lourdes Perea has a very important publication. She works at Technosite, and the piece of work is entitled Co-Accessibility. How much can we learn from those people who are using support products and who actually access the web? They are the real experts. As Alberto was saying, companies need to foresee user participation because there's no other way about it. Without them, we are nothing. You can do it in many ways, of course. You can involve them in many ways. Why not harness social networks? Why not harness the thousands of interactions that happen in the network through the support products? We need to be able to gather that information. We need to be able to store it. And also, we need to be able to do data mine it and to obtain teachings from that information. And that's a great challenge from the technological point of view. There's something that many of you have already mentioned, and it's been a long-standing concern for me, and as from what you're saying, it's still a reality. When in the projects people say we need to take users into account, the first thing that it's not so clear to me is to only use them in the testing phase. It's nice that they're involved at some point, but I get the feeling that they are not adequately used, and it has to do with the available resources. As Jaime said, it is quite costly to introduce in a project's budget the need for certain resources. They're very valuable, just as valuable as the interface creator, and they are not adequately involved. But another point that has been made in this panel is that we are using users who are already a bit biased because they are already experts, because they're used as testers too often. We often use them, and the information that they deliver is not really all that valuable, because in many situations when I want to involve a standard user, and I mean a user that's not so biased in the use of this type of technologies, so they stand up for the value of what they say. So this is closely linked to the fact that we work with a certain group. It so happens with you because you work with groups that are real users, and you try to tackle these issues. I think there's a long way to go still along these lines. I think there's something missing, both at the university training level and in training as a whole. We are missing an accessibility culture. For it to be more generalized, that's what we are missing. As Sadru was saying, for a certain device you will need to develop a piece of software, but when they develop the software, they should ask me, whose life will I make easier with this code that I'm developing? Or whose life am I going to be making more difficult? Because if I suppress something, I might not be taking into account that indeed the sight-impaired person who will need that device will require that information, which is a code line only. But what really happens is that if you realize this, when the product has already been put together, it's almost impossible and unfeasible in economic terms to modify the mistake that you made back in the day. In my university lessons, I always tell my students, now, please, when you develop something, think about what you could do to make someone's life easier. And someone will raise their hand and say, yes, if I introduce this, the Zoom will enable a person with a sight impairment to see this. If you foresee that, that's something that you can implement quickly, and it will pose no problem in the future. So that general culture, which should be a universal culture, should soak in since elementary school. Another important aspect is not to engage users at the end of the process, but rather at the beginning of the process, in both stages, so that all users who are going to use that device or that technology will play a role. And from that point on, you will determine what they're going to use, what they need, and what they're going to be capable of doing. As you were saying, if you suppress a code line, you might be halting certain possibilities. And this has to do with compatibility issues that will escalate up. So you need to engage all users at the beginning and at the end of the cycle. You, in this case, will be able to duly identify the requirements for the program. The engineer will act upon this basis. And they're not really verifying their design. They're verifying that the requirements posed by users are complied with. So it's not about verifying the design, it's verifying the requirements of those users on that product. This is why inclusive education is so important. Since very early childhood, children need to be used to coexisting with problems which are not their own problems, are different to their own problems. In line with what you were saying, I would like to mention that, in my opinion, users have been disregarded quite frequently. And when you were talking about biased users earlier, you were calling them so-called experts, or they're very biased. So for me, this is a great challenge, an even greater challenge. There's someone who I'd rather not mention. This person had tested many mobile devices, and for our group it was a personal challenge to do this right, and it was a personal challenge for us to get this person managing this adequately, because if that person managed to adequately use this device, then escalating it up was supposed to be more likely. So you get a lot of satisfaction when hostile users who have tested many things and who are greatly biased end up giving the go to your device. So this is a profit for everyone. But something which is key is that accessibility is a means, a way forward. We want to have technology to improve people's lives, and there are many things which can be improved from that point of view. So sometimes we just try to make things accessible, but the work that we should undertake since the very beginning with user is specifying what they need. They may say, I need something that will provide this functionality, and if technology is not created adequately to facilitate that, then we need to focus on technology. But first, we should take care of our relationship with users. And the first point is not technology. First, we need to deal with functionality so that there's greater integration, participation, and any goal you want to achieve. And from that point on, we will come to accessible solutions with a larger or lesser effort. When we want to further develop information society, we shouldn't just be technology-centered, because we're being biased by the available devices already, by what they enable you to do it or not. And development shouldn't run along those tracks. I was talking to people from a Parkinson association, and we were telling them, listen, out of all of these technologies, what could be useful for you to improve your life? And the chairman said, when I'm putting my coat on, if I'm suddenly blocked, I no longer can put my coat on. So I said, okay, they can talk to my colleague from the robotics industries so that they can create some sort of coat hanger that can help them put their coat on. Because I'm from a telecommunications department and I couldn't deal with that. But from that comment, you may come to a solution, and in the beginning possibly that's not what you wanted to know about, but you're coming to find information, and we shouldn't be prejudiced. And users don't want to use tablets for your purposes, but for their own purposes. So you need to hear them so that you can get to know what they really need. And along those lines, it is really key to be open-hearted and open-minded towards what they are saying. If we don't set up this interaction, there won't be any type of interaction. They say that if you have a hammer, all problems are subtle. So this happens to people who work in the technology. When we want to come to solutions, we base ourselves on what we know and we have available, and from that basis we're trying to find a solution. David was making a comment regarding technology earlier, and we didn't talk too much about it. So I do think I should pick up that point. You need to be very careful when you take on a user's experience and you want to validate a system. We need to be very rigorous with our scientific method. We want to issue our works, and this is something that they demand from us when you want to issue your works. But increasingly, and I agree with Miguel Angel, increasingly you can get more and more information from a user. So when the user enters your environment, you need to pay due attention to them. And it doesn't really matter how they access the computer, but rather what new functionality the computer is offering to them. So I do think that this has been a challenge for many of us in this panel. After finishing our degrees, we've had to think about how to really focus on user-centered technologies. As Danny said, we need to think about this since the very beginning. Since the beginning, throughout the process, and at the end of the process, so that we can come to a successful end. But this is something that they don't teach to us at in the universities. And I take this chance to advertise something, which is that this year we will have a subject in the Information Technologies degree that we provide at the UNED. We will focus on this point because we want to train our programmers about how to take into account user requirements and how to carry out assessments since the beginning and throughout the project. And also, we need to be very careful when we do this because this is our field of action. So this happens at the university stage, but we should go back to earlier times. And as Guillermo Fesser said in the morning, when they are attending primary education, when children are attending primary education, we should give them an instruction manual as to how to relate to one another. And I would say even more. It's not just having an instruction manual, it's also having a colleague that will have different needs, because that's a school of life. It's about learning that your colleague, that your classmate has a wheelchair, and thus they need a toilet or a washroom without stairs so that they can adequately access. That's where this awareness starts, an awareness that has to do with respect towards diversity and towards differences. If you will, I would like to hear some questions from the audience about the topics that we're currently covering, so that we can also get to know the things that you're concerned about and things that may have to do with topics of the panel, so that we can give you our opinion or try to solve your concerns from the stage. So if someone has a question, please request the microphone. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Josuan Martin. I would like to pose a question, or rather make a reflection regarding accessibility and quality. We've talked about accessibility in training. We've talked about how sometimes new requirements negatively impact an already available accessibility, and they are a drawback along those lines. So my question is, up to what extent accessibility, apart from being a lack of awareness issue, is something that has to do with a more general problem that has to do with a lack of quality in enhancements in products, in as you mentioned, taking into account customers and not users, thinking about from the corporate level. I know that this is a very general question, and I know that a lot of comments may be suitable, but I would like to hear your comments from the panel. From the theoretical point of view, regarding quality definitions in the ISO standards, well, there's something included in the ISO standards which is already user quality or user adaptability. So in the ICT market, I think that successful companies are very careful with user experiences. And from the point of view of accessibility, I must say that in the UK, they have a manual for excellence and quality in the UK universities, and there's a chapter devoted to accessibility. I cannot envisage one single university in the world which is excellent and that doesn't really take into account disabilities. I would like to elaborate on what Alejandro said, and I would like to do so by making two comments. On the one hand, we have quality and accessibility, and there's a sentence that we hear often: it would be very nice to not have to talk about accessibility, it would be very nice for everything to be integrated already. I think that's utopic, and it's also impossible, because something could only be accessible when it's fully closed up and it's somehow dead. When you have a system that's a live system and that continuously evolves, challenges will always rise, and some new things will need to be made accessible. So to a certain extent, we must work towards this goal. So I don't think accessibility should not exist. That would be utopic. So now regarding universities, there is a reflection that we all need to make, all users as a whole. We have professors, of course, there are a few professors here in this panel. We have our own responsibility, but I'm also talking about students, and we must take into account customers and the concerns of we should talk about customers, we should talk about professors and about their needs. And the paradigm that's included in Bologna is about us not having to just teach, but also about having students come to learn. So the classic role and the classic approach of a master class should progressively be left aside. Professor must always be aware that this is a live system, and as a live system, it'll evolve in due time. I just wanted to make a brief comment, and thank you so much for your question. Quality has to do with satisfying certain goals. If those goals are not well outlined and they don't really contemplate everything that has to do with accessibility, people will think that they're teaching with good quality, but you may say, I have a lot of teaching quality, a high teaching quality, because my students finish up their degree in 5 years, and you actually have 4-year courses. Well, that's efficiency, not really quality. But if your goal is to assess learning capacity on a student basis with the largest range of variety possible, and if you achieve quality in that context, then you will be successful, because within a lot of diversity, you are managing to get people learning what you want them to learn. So that's quality teaching, that's quality learning. But if that's not one of your objectives, you will think that what you're doing is top quality, and someone else may say this is really rubbish, because they're calling something quality, which is not what I would understand as quality. For instance, quality in health. If you measure quality taking into account the time that it takes you to obtain service, then that's a way to measure it, but perhaps you would measure it regarding how much time it takes you to get cured. I really like to use something as an example, and I agree with you. You need to take into account certain objectives to measure quality, but I think that mobile technologies are a clear-cut example. There was a law in the in the USA that forced industries to adapt themselves so that devices would be more accessible than they used to. From that point on, they started paving the way forth, and the remaining companies have had to follow their lead. And right now we have a quite accessible mobile technology. So this is a specific example in a specific environment, but it's not a simple example nevertheless. I'm not saying that we shouldn't compare it with educational models or with health models. Nevertheless, I do think that it is a paradigm that goes to show that whenever you set up certain objectives and whenever you include accessibility among your quality objectives, you can achieve this. You can be successful in your approach. I don't think we have extreme accessibility for our devices. Nevertheless, the pace is much better. So people came to our stand to check the different solutions that we had, and a lady approached us and said that she couldn't use the mobile phone. It was an Android phone. They had sold it to her at the store. She had motor disabilities, but they had told her that she could use it without any problem. So she saw this push button and she was very astounded. She wanted to know how much it cost. We just told her that it was at the Android market. It was available. We downloaded it for her on her smartphone and she started using it immediately. She couldn't believe it. It was really a great satisfaction for the project to see that actually something that she considered, she was saying that she would pay anything for it. And it just took us 2 minutes to download the application from the Android market and to set it up according to her preferences and make her use. It was fantastic to do it. Another application that we have developed, and there's been a lot of debate regarding it. So it was very suitable for us to have this conversation today because there's an argument between the different partners in the ENG project. They met this weekend and they were talking about the iOS 7, and precisely one of the features that it offers is the switch that enables you to control the device through a button. We had already researched this a few years ago. Nevertheless, they have developed this for themselves, and this operating system also offers camera tracking, which is another solution that we have developed in our project, which is the Open Gazer. Just through a web camera, you can do side tracking in order to use this as a switcher.
Among the numerous tests, someone had the locking syndrome, whereby all the muscles are paralyzed excepting the eyes. He had tried a $10,000 device and it didn't work. However, the other solution really worked out wonderfully, and those are examples of the best practices, and it is important to make them available to everybody. Now, in terms of cloud, if you ask me what were the best practices, perhaps the methodology we used at the very beginning, it's something that starts from day one, 3 months on. There was something that was working, that was just giving a hint on what we wanted to develop, something that people could download easily, allowing full involvement of the entire community, giving you like a first touch and feel of what you want to develop, and making it available for the general audience. I think that is really one of the best practices that all these European projects should comply with. I mean, we need a business model that is properly well thought from day one, that can be run from day one. I think that the only way things come to be useful for users is for them to be in the market. And that doesn't necessarily mean that everything is going to have a cost and a price to the final users. That shouldn't be a problem the way I see it. But there must be a market for every single stakeholder to be very interested to improve it with the passing of time and to provide an utmost useful service to end users. As we said, all the projects entail a hefty investment and large human results. Shall we increase the sum invested? Do you think we should increase this investment? We are very clear about the profit or the benefit. The investment we make in adapted systems for people with impairment means that they will use less the traditional means. So someone has a salary, they go to work, and every transaction that we take out from the office to the ATM is cost saving. Let's be honest. I mean, if we manage our ATMs to be user-friendly, available for everybody, not to leave anybody behind, then these will be translated into cost efficiencies, and therefore the branches won't have to be larger or refurbished because the ATM transactions are much faster than the transactions at the branch. Just the welcome package saying hello, good morning, how are you doing? This takes hours. The ATM doesn't say hello, good morning, how are you doing? No, they are just waiting for the instruction to cash out the money and to receive any single payment. And this is our objective. At the end of the day, this affects the P&L of the bank, the profit and loss account. We have been investing in this type of technologies for quite some time. At the very beginning, only for visually impaired people, then for elderly people, or for foreigners, immigrants who are not very fluent in Spanish. We've also introduced another interface for hearing impaired people. We are introducing numerous interfaces so that everybody can use our ATMs. We do not want to leave anybody behind. Not only are we pleading their needs, the needs of these clients who want to be autonomous, who want to withdraw money from the ATM without onlookers around, but on the other hand, truth is this is translated into numerous cost efficiencies. We are very clear about it. And we think this is clearly beneficial. It's a win-win for everybody. Is this investment going to benefit users? Well, we strongly think so. The projects are partially funded by the EU, but the corporations are investing hefty sums of money, and we believe that they are going to bring about a change, a major change. If you are launching any type of product, it is important to know if they are going to be successful or not. You can launch it, of course, but your profit and loss account might not be as profitable as you initially desired, and perhaps this is not sustainable in time. But we believe that this is a reality, that this is going to improve the autonomy of people with impairments. It is going to foster the relationship with these type of devices. It is going to improve the customization capabilities and hence the relationship between users and the new technologies. Under this angle, we believe we are going to bring about a major paramount change. In the next 4 years, this is going to be a reality existing in every single platform, And in a very simple manner, any given user facing a new device, a new update to a new operating system, this is going to be easily configured by them, as they did with other devices, just by introducing the flash drive into the system or anything else. In Aegis, this was clear from day one. Any app or any device should be accessible, and accessibility should be fully embedded. And investing in saying, okay, I'm going to develop one accessibility framework, this is going to entail cost savings in adapting any type of application or existing platform. It is already 6:10. We could talk forever about this. Perhaps we can do a very, very quick Q&A session before closing this session. I think there is somebody at the back. If you could please hand over a microphone, a wireless microphone, please.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Bermúdez.
Good afternoon. My name is Bermúdez de Castro, and I'm talking as a user. I have a 76% impairment, and I am fortunately receiving a pension, and I'd like to offer myself as a volunteer because I'm not allowed to work. But if you want to work with an impaired person, I'm free to help you in an altruistic manner, because again, I am fortunate to receive my pension. On the other hand, when you were talking about ATMs, I would talk about not only ATMs, but every single device which requires an identification of the user. Perhaps you've tried it, or you've tried to do it before, but why don't you improve the fingerprint further? Why don't you make more extensive use of the fingerprint and the recognition thereof? Because I just wanted to share with you the fact that for us it is complicated to have these type of devices using a PIN code and being able to see on the keyboard of the ATM. It is difficult to read and interpret what the ATM says. I've only been impaired for 1 year. Perhaps you've done this so far, but again, my question is, why don't you use fingerprint further? And if the hearing impaired person needs headsets, well, here you go. Why don't you just provide headsets? But I think it is difficult to withdraw money from the ATM with a credit card, even if there is braille, you can't really identify it. Thank you very much indeed. I'll just take notes. I'll write down your contact information. In my TechnoSite department, we run numerous user trials and needs assessment